right, my Renowned fam, welcome back to the Renowned Leadership Podcast. I am, as always, so stoked that you're here to listen to what I got to say and listen to what my guest has to say. And you know, it's funny. I remember growing up, I always thought people that were older than me, first of all, growing up, I remember thinking 25 was freaking old. Okay. And I wish I could still think 25 was freaking old. But I remember growing up thinking that people older than me were just ew, ick. And but the funny thing is, and I tell my dad this, and this is actually something he told his dad. The older I get, the smarter my dad gets, the more wisdom my dad has. And one of the things I've learned the very hard way in life is when you have someone of age, we'll say, that is willing to impart their wisdom on you, it behooves you to just shut the hell up and listen to what they have to say, because they've been around the block. They've done all the dumb crap you're about to do, at least for the most part. And, they can kind of steer you away from doing the dumb crap. So today I got John with me, who is exactly that guy. He is a self-proclaimed baby boomer. And he's been in business for a hot minute. He was in business before I was even born, which means he has more wisdom to impart on us than I can even shake a stick at. So, John, welcome, man. And I am so excited to just dive into all your years and years of experience. And hopefully we can change some people's perspectives and lives out there.
Yeah. Well, I am tempted to go, I'm sorry, what did you say? But I'll tell you, I grew up as a baby boomer. So, we were sort of the first generation of smart ass sarcastic. I mean, we really pissed off our parents because they were kind of, Jimmy Stewart, Donna Reed kind of things. And all of a sudden we showed up and I think probably scared the hell out of them. So, yeah, I've been in business. I got out of graduate school in 1970. So that'll give you a pretty good indication. I worked for somebody else for a few years and then went into business for myself. I've run I've started in different companies since I got out of school. 4 of them were started, built, and one of them was started, built, and then crashed and burned. And that's where I come up with my gift of devastation. I learned my lesson of ego over kindness not real early on, but certainly I don't know, back in the late 80s, early 90s is when I learned my lesson to change my focus, which is why I call my company Changing the Focus. Because I don't know I know your background is military, so I don't know if it's the same. But I know that when I was coming through, the idea was the only person that's going to win here is the person that's at the top of the pile or the front of the line or that kind of thing. And you had to do whatever it would take to get there. And I may have misinterpreted that some, I don't really know, but I do know that I did a whole lot of things when I was younger in business than I was comfortable with. And when I got my gift of devastation, I was able to sort of turn that around and rebuild my life on a different set of principles, ergo the other companies that got built and sold. I grew up in Washington, D.C. I was born and raised, not the grandson of, nobody related to me was ever elected to office. So don't blame me for anything, please. I do remember being a kid in DC, and I'm the right age to have, physically seen Martin Luther King on the mall with the Capitol, or the mall down by the Lincoln Memorial. I'm also old enough to have seen the Beatles between the 2 Ed Sullivan shows. So I don't know what makes that good, bad, or indifferent, but the 60s was sort of a wild and crazy time, which really made me feel as if we were going to sort of grow up and into this, age of Aquarius kind of thing, people caring and supporting and nurturing and the things that we're trying right now in the way of leadership to do. And yet, as we got older, everybody just kind of hung a right or a left and just took off. And the idea of, well, let's pull together here and make this really work kind of went out of the window. So, I'm really grateful for the time that I've been a part of school and or business, because from the mid 60s to the 2020 or so is quite a wild ride, from before punch cards to to thumb drives and everything in between. So it's a really interesting time to be capable of learning as I continue to grow and evolve.
Yeah, it's so incredible, and again, thank you for being willing to not just learn, but also share what you've learned. Because I've noticed as I work through, I get a lot of I don't want to say negativity, but a lot of flack from the older generations of how I suggest we do things, because I do suggest, I guess, as much as I hate to say it, a little more lovey-dovey than what the older generations were. But we've kind of transcended from the business is business and personal is personal,
Yeah.
and they don't mix. The problem with that is I mean, that's a flawed fundamental just from the get. Because if Sally is your executive assistant, and she is going through, maybe her mom's ill or whatever, that's going to affect her work, and you're basically paying her for nothing because she's so unfocused
Right.
that she just can't be effective and productive. And we can't tell people, well, get over it. I mean, your dad dies, that's a significant impact on your life, and that's going to affect
Yeah.
you for several months. There is no get over
Right. No,
it.
you're absolutely right. And you also can't try to compare in if you don't have that if you don't have that experience. Please don't say, somebody says my father just died. Please don't say, oh God, I know exactly how you feel. My cat died last week. I swear to God, I heard somebody say that, and I thought if I could have grabbed them and drugged them from the room and backed up a little time machine, it would have been fantastic. Because it's like, why would you think those two have any correlation to each other? So the idea of, I mean, and that's one of those things that never made any sense to me. This idea of, well, just leave your personal life at home. And I'm thinking, I just fought through an hour of DC traffic. I'm going to walk in the office and be really not happy unless I do something to make that different. If I just let circumstances drive how I'm feeling and acting, I'm going to walk around with a lot of anger and resentment and judgments, just because the world doesn't do what I want it to do, or when it does, it doesn't do it very often. So the thing that I've learned, I guess, over time is just to sort of let go of anger, resentment, and judgment, because it doesn't do me any good. Being angry at someone for 10 years, carrying a 10-year grudge, doesn't hurt the person you're holding the grudge. It only hurts you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's really is an interesting conundrum that that's certainly not what I was taught as a kid. I was taught, only the lead dog gets the view and you're got to scramble to get there. And I found that when I paid more attention to Sally, who's going through some struggles or coming into work late, or you notice that she's misfocused, or Jim, who used to really be top in sales and all of a sudden he's distracted and disfocused, instead of just writing them off, going in and digging a little deeper with an emotional connection to them. That's my whole thing. Is there are two basic connections in life. One is intellectual and one is emotional. And people these days are talking about wanting to have an engaged workforce. And if the only difference between a regular couple and an engaged couple is emotion, that's it. That's the only difference. These two people like each other. These two people love each other. So when you mix emotion with knowledge, all of a sudden it becomes a much more tactile, energy driven sense of we're connected on some level. I did an exercise once, this was overseas, and in Jordan, so I didn't get in as much trouble as I did when I was in Saudi and did this. But I play, yeah, Saudi wasn't real crazy about me playing this song. I took the words to a Pavarotti song called Nessun and just typed the words out on a piece of paper and passed it out to everybody. I said, now look at these words. Tell me how emotionally driven you are by these words. And everybody's like, what are you talking about? This is just words on a piece of paper. Listen to this. And I played Pavarotti singing that song. And the only difference between the words on the paper and Pavarotti singing it was the emotion that he put into the words. And people went from, oh my God, why are we even doing this, to tears coming down their face. I mean, I've been listening to one particular aria he does since I was a kid, and it still brings chills to my neck when he hits this high C. So, you know, if we can find a way to have leaders relax enough to be willing to connect emotionally with people, it makes all the difference in the world as far as productivity, absenteeism, turnover, profitability. All of these things go away if the leadership of an organization can learn how to appreciate and communicate and build a level of trust with their workers that most of the workers who have probably are on the job with you have probably never felt before.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And you know, it's funny because everything you just mentioned, you know, whether it's productivity, trust, um, accountability, responsibility, all those things stem from having a solid relationship as a team, as a cohesive unit.
Right, right.
And one of the things I talk about a lot is I help companies, as far as what my company does, build teams from the ground up that resemble the best and most elite special operations teams. And the reason I use that is because those are the most cohesive teams, right? Mm-hmm. And you know, when you think about it, when you think about everything these guys go through, what do they have to do? The first thing is they know each other inside and out. Right. The number one rule in the military is if your family life isn't straight, you are non-mission capable.
Right.
Because if you're worried about your wife paying bills, or if you're worried about your kid having a surgery, or whatever the case is, whatever's happening at home while you're gone, right, you become not only a danger to yourself, but a danger to everyone around you. Right. Right. So we focus heavy on, is your family life straight? Right. In order to do that, we have to know your wife's name. We have to know your kids' birthdays. We have to know if your dad has cancer. We have to know these things. We know these things by building personal relationships with each other, you know, building that love bond, you know, to go to your analogy, which was a great analogy, by the way. And that's how we do things. But when you go into the civilian workforce, what is horribly absent?
Yeah, that connection is horribly absent. I mean, taking the time to get to know somebody is considered a waste of time. I mean, this is superfluous. We don't really need to do, you just need to, I mean, my father, the good news about, sometimes I worked with my father for a couple of years, and he was an amazing teacher at how not to be a leader. You know, and so just remember, listeners, you can learn from anybody. Whether they're good or they're bad, you can learn how to be, and you can learn how not to be. And through his examples, I learned how not to be. And, you know, he was sort of like, hire them at minimum wage, work them till they get angry and disgruntled, and then fire them and hire another guy at minimum wage. And he couldn't understand why customer satisfaction was low. And, you know, we had a large warehouse full of thousands of items, and we had stockouts all the time, because the people really didn't care. They didn't care because he didn't care. So it just, you know, it all trickles down. That's about the only trickle down method I know that actually works, is if the leader is engaged, then the other people can become engaged. If the leader is not engaged, then the other people aren't going to care enough. You know, I mean, that's why I've never been on a special ops team, but I would imagine that the key ingredient is an intimate knowledge of what's going on personally and professionally in this person's life, and supporting them through whatever it is, positive or negative. And I guarantee you, if you find a company that does that right now in the private sector, they are 1 in 1 million. Well, not maybe they're getting better these days. Maybe it's 1 in 100,000, but it's not a lot. I guarantee it's not a lot.
Right. And what I think is really funny, John, is um, when you talk to companies about it, they say, oh, well, we can't afford it. And
Mm,
it's like, well, that's funny you say that because um, how much money do you spend on new hires?
right.
How much money do you spend on advertising to get applications? And then once you get applications, you got to screen the applications, do background checks, do health and in some cases health checks, in other cases, or in most cases drug checks. You got to do all these things to get them just in the door. And then once you get them in the door, you have to onboard them, you have to train them, you have to walk them through the process. By the time we're said and done, one new hire is running you anywhere from 5, 10, in some cases $15,000. And that's just an entry level job. If we're
Right.
talking middle management, if we're talking executive or director status, we're talking possibly even into the hundreds of thousands of dollars
Right.
to do, so can we, you say we can't afford to do that.
Mm,
In my opinion, we can not afford to do that
right.
because
Right.
it's too,
It's an absolute. I mean, it's an absolute. You have to train your people to be effective. There's nothing more in all the years that I've been training and coaching. There has been nothing more motivating than clear, achievable goals. Not money, not promotions, but making a person feel as if they are achieving the goals that have been set before them, giving them a sense of success and a sense of self-worth and a sense of value, and then allowing them to continue forward on that process. But when you ask somebody to do something that's outside the scope of their real capacity, I need you to do this in a week, and it's going to take a month, and it's going to take 2 extra people. And so basically you're just sending this person out to fail. And then, we are surprised when they're not all excited and enthusiastic about taking on the next time I suggest that maybe you should trust me on this one. Just trust me on it. And so trust, I'm doing a workshop, I think it's next week online, about how to build and sustain trust in an organization. And it all comes down to emotion. I mean, that's it. It just does. Are you willing to be vulnerable? I guess. Are you willing to be vulnerable? And if you are, you got a chance of building a team that's worth having.
yeah, vulnerability is such a scary word to us because we feel like, oh, well, in order to be vulnerable, they have to know our deepest, darkest secrets. And that's not at all what it is. Vulnerability is, to me, the base. If I were to put one word to define what vulnerable means, I would say it's simply honesty.
Hmm.
Brutal, unbridled honesty.
Hmm.
Right. And that goes to, oh, I made I misjudged the situation with Scott. And I thought, Scott was not engaged. I thought he was wasting company time. I thought all these things, when come to find out, Scott's trying to put out fires in his personal life,
Hmm.
and it's being open and honest about that misjudgment. Or, it's being honest about, hey guys, we didn't hit our mark, our goal this month. We can't keep going this route or we're going to start losing people
Right.
because we can't afford to maintain. So, I mean, it's that brutal honesty, or it's the brutal honesty of, hey guys, you did a great freaking job this month. I'm
Yes.
so proud of you.
Right.
Um, just giving people positive emotions a lot of times is hard for people.
Right. It's hard. I find it, and I use my own example. I designed a program for recovering addicts and alcoholics to reunite with their family, to find a way to rebuild the trust that was violated when they went out and became, running with alcoholism and drug addiction. And so how do you bring them back together? And it took a long time for anybody to let go of this is never going to be any different. This is never going to be any different. It's always going to be this way. And it took forever to get people to let go and realize that changes will come. If they're doing what they're supposed to do and you're doing what you're supposed to do, this will move forward. You just have to learn how to trust that. And some situations are really hard. I mean, especially in situations like that, where you've got trust being violated on a daily basis, and then all of a sudden you're trying to rebuild it. It's hard to rebuild trust once it's been violated.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up addicts and alcoholics because I am, how do I say this? Um, I am familiar with being that family member. And it is hard, because even though you love the person, um, you feel betrayed almost. But when you look at a company or a corporation, how often just I would hate to see that number. How often do they violate the trust of their employees?
Mm.
I
Yeah.
would say it's probably up close to 99% of the time.
Well, it's whenever it's more convenient than not doing it. It's I would never lie to you unless I had to.
Right.
Kind of thing. So it is hard. I mean, it really is. I remember um, when I said that one company crashed and burned, I remember people coming in my office going, should we get out of here? Should we go find other jobs? Or is this not going to be here in a week or 2 weeks? And I tried to be supportive, honest, which is, if it was me, I'd probably be looking for a job because I don't think this is turning around. And the problem is, of course, you lose your best people immediately because they have options. They have options to go places. And it's just, being honest is really hard when it's going to be damaging to you. And did you do this? Yes, I did. But the nice thing is about honesty and vulnerability, like you were saying before, is that once that uh, light gets shined in the corner, everybody knows what's in the corner now. So it's not a scary thing anymore. It's like shining a light under the bed, and there's no boogeyman under here. So the more that we can be willing to be open, I mean, that's why willingness is number one in the Daily Six, because we need to be willing to try new uh, actions, find new teachers to teach us new lessons. One of the things I used to say to very high-end leaders was, you can't fix this with this, because this is what got you in trouble in the first place. So let's put something else in here and see if you can mix it with what you already know and come up with a new sort of solution between the two. Because I don't work with people who aren't really intelligent. They're very intelligent. But they're still having problems. And it doesn't always come down to emotion, but a lot of times it does.
Yeah, I would say I would be comfortable saying a solid 80% of the time it's that lack of EQ that's causing most of your problems. So we're going to talk about your book, The Daily Six, here in a little bit, but before we dive
Okay.
into that, well, you tell me, John, because I'm not really sure. Because I know the Daily Six is based off of your company that crashed and burned. So let's go ahead and talk about your company that crashed and burned real quick. Walk us through that process. What happened?
Okay.
What led to it, and then most importantly, where I would appreciate if you'd spend most of your time, is how did you recover?
All right. I realized I was working for a person that wasn't somebody I needed to or wanted to work for. I was in an industry I liked, but I didn't like the way this person was doing business in that industry. So I knew the industry inside and out. So I decided that what I would do is open my own company. And so I went and did what a lot of entrepreneurs do. I took out a second trust note on my house and got a couple friends who also were in the industry and wanted to go along, and they put in some money and I put in the money, and we now had we had a stake. The, the good news was the level of ignorance that I went into this with was quite high, because I thought I had a ton of money. I'm telling you what, we can just have. I had 7 weeks worth of money, and I didn't realize that until about year 3. 7 weeks worth of money. I had to sell it, collect it, and then buy more stuff, and then sell it again. And we did it. And the good news is the economy was very solid and growing at a very steady pace. So we were able to grow right along with the economy. The business doubled its first 7 or 8 years. It continued to double in size and double in profitability. This is kind of where my ego began to tell me that I'm smarter than, better than, quicker than, than anybody else. So I don't really need to listen to anybody else. I had gotten divorced early on, probably year 1 or 2. That's a whole other story, because I went into business to spend more time with my wife and children. And by the 2nd year, they had had enough of me, kind of. So I'd gotten remarried, had a little boy. And this is now coming out of the 80s into the early 90s. And we were doing, I don't know, about $60 million worth of business a year. That's based on an average sale of $35. So there was a lot of stuff going through the business at a time. Actually, my old partner sent me a note the other day. He said, we may not have been doing billions of dollars, but we had next day delivery down pat. We were always next day delivery. And so what happened is the Congress decided to make banks remove their, and this is a lot like what you're hearing today, it made them remove their highly inflated value of their real estate. They had to take it off their books as an asset, because they got a building that they're valuing at $20 million and it's worth about $300,000. So they had to take all that stuff off, and the only thing they could use as an asset at that point, it was cash. So how much cash do you have? So the banks decided to start looking around and see who was cash heavy. And I was cash heavy. We had plenty of cash, plenty of money, but we also had a lot of debt because the bank had just loaned me more money. So they moved me into what's referred to as out of balance. I had too much debt to equity, even though I had lots of money. And so without my knowledge, the bank issued a 30-day notice that they only sent to the court. They didn't send to me. And like the day before the court appearance, I got notice that I was supposed to be in court tomorrow, kind of thing. And I went to court. The judge went, "This is the most unethical thing I've ever seen in my life." And I could hear it coming, the but. I heard, I could hear the but coming. But, you did sign these documents and they are valid documents. So I'm going to award your assets to this bank until they are repaid for their money. And I had about $20 million worth of assets. I had $5 million worth of debt. And I thought, this is easy. This is, again, goes back to that level of ignorance that I was frightening, that I didn't realize how ignorant it was. And I thought, okay, well, they'll sell off $5 million of the debt, probably sell off the retail stores, and then we'll be good. And a friend of mine called and said, "You know what they're going to do, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they're going to sell off $5 million." He said, "Oh, no. They're going to sell off all your assets for $5 million. That's all they're concerned about. They'll take all $20 million of your assets and find somebody who'll give them $5 million for that. And then you're out of business." And that's exactly what they did. And so, basically I sort of went from, this young kid who's tearing it up to sitting on the curb going, now what am I supposed to do? Because the way the bank came in, they violated the trust of all the suppliers because they didn't pay any of the suppliers. They violated, they bounced the sales tax check of about $60,000 to the state of Virginia, was very unhappy that they didn't get paid their sales tax. So it was kind of it was a brutal mugging, I guess you would call it, of a repayment plan. And the story that goes in the book is that I went home that day just absolutely devastated. And that's where gift of devastation comes from. I was absolutely devastated. Everything in my life had just turned to absolute shit. I mean, it was just like, nothing in my life has any value anymore. I wasn't valuing my wife. I wasn't valuing my health or my children or anything else, just the money, power, and position that had just been taken away. I get home, and my son, who meets me every day at the door when I come home from work, are we good? Are we good on time?
Yeah, you're good. Keep going.
Okay. This meets me at the door. I walk in the door and he sticks his hand straight up. You know how a little kid does, sticks his hand straight up. Pick me up, Dad, pick me up. And he said something I had never heard him say again, which was, pick me up, it's good for you. And I was like, okay, I'm thinking all I want to do is get some bourbon and get in a corner and leave me alone, kind of thing. Just let me go over here and feel sorry for myself. And he would not hear of it. It was absolutely not something he was going to allow me to do. So he's jumping up and down and he's running around. And he and I used to run around the house and chase each other with rolled up towels, snap each other with a rolled up towel. And now this is a 3-year-old kid. I never snapped him with my towel. So it's not like we don't have to call protective services or anything. But he certainly snapped me a number of times. But we would run around and chase each other through the house. And he got me running around and chasing him through the house. And the next thing I know, I'm laughing. I'm having a great time. And his laughter, and you know what a little kid's laughter sounds like. It's almost like a high-pitched lawnmower. It's just like, it's amazing. And his laughter went through me like a jacuzzi works on knotted up muscles. And after about 10 minutes of this, we just ended up on the floor looking at each other about this far apart, laughing and crying. And what happened to me was this thunderbolt that said, if you can find a way to be happy today, you can find a way to be happy any day you want, because you can choose to be happy. You can choose to focus on things that will change the way in which you feel. And that's when the idea of changing the focus came up. That's when the idea of how am I going to react to the situation? Because this was all just day one. I mean, I had 6 more months of working with the bank and getting all this other stuff and getting them paid back their money. And, but that's the business was in business for 12 years. So it wasn't like it just came in and went out of business. And sadly, about 350 employees lost their jobs because the bank needed cash, and I had cash. So, I have a good friend of mine who had a business at the same time, same type of business, but he didn't get liquidated because he didn't have enough cash on hand for them to liquidate the loan. So instead of liquidating the loan, they worked with him to get him through for the next year or two. So, I learned an awful lot of things from that experience, but it also helped me build the principles that would guide the next half of my life. And I was able to rebuild my business and my family and my relationship with my kids on a different set of principles, ones that focus on them being more important rather than me being more important. So
yeah, I want to just sit with that for a second. The idea that the worst thing that's probably ever happened to you in your life, or close to the worst thing that's probably ever happened to you in your life, ended up being the best thing that ever happened to you in your life in hindsight.
Yeah.
And I think, I was doing an interview for someone that's writing a book. They wanted to talk to me about resilience and how I've built my mind to be resilient. And one of the key principles I live off of is it's never as bad as you think it is.
That's probably
and
true.
When we look back, I think about all the hard training I went through in the military, and I was, oh, this sucks. This is the worst when I was in the moment. But
Yeah.
now when I look back at it, I kind of look back at it with fondness and I miss it a little bit because I know I got through it. Right. That's
Yeah.
the problem is we don't know that we're going to get through it. So a lot of times, and I'm sure, and this is honestly, uh, this is exactly what happened to you. Your focus got shifted to where it was, you know what? This isn't that bad. I'm playing with
Right.
my son. I'm having fun. I'm laughing. I'm not dying.
Right.
And when that shift happened in your brain, you were able, like you said, to focus on different things. And then from that, build something
Right.
on the right foundation, right? That the bank hopefully can't take away from you anymore. Hopefully you learn that lesson.
Yeah, I went pretty much debt free from that point forward. It just, but yeah, and it is all perspective. It's, life is perspective, it is what you think it is. And, you can make it horrible, you can make it great. It's all kind of what's going on up in here. And I think the idea that, we just have to be careful of, there's a book that I read a long time ago, and one of the things in it, it says, there's nothing more incorrect than the idea of idle thoughts. And when we let idle thoughts roll around in our head, this is never going to work. I'm not, because idle thoughts, I don't have a lot of, and maybe other people do, I don't know, but I don't remember sitting around thinking about rainbows and moonbeams when my idle thoughts were rolling around. It was usually like, oh my God, I can't make payroll. I don't know what to do about this. And nowadays, I guess, because there are coaches available and there are people to talk to, I had nobody to talk to. The people I called were people who had been in the same industry and had retired, but in their retiring, they had signed non-compete agreements with the guy who bought them. So they couldn't talk to me about how to build anything or change anything. So it's, we really need to utilize, working on a mindset of resilience is great. And if you have a process for that, you should, can it and sell it, because people need that. I mean, they really do. They get beat up. I mean, it's a tough place to live. I mean, we get beat up emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and we need to find a way to sort of shake that off and get back up and get back into the stream of life, rather than
Yeah,
sitting over here feeling sorry for ourselves.
absolutely. And social media is the worst, man. I hate social media with a passion because when we look at social media, all we see are people's A sides. We never see their B sides, And
Mm,
for the younger people, I'm talking about a cassette tape where had to flip the cassette tape over, and that was the B sides. That was the less popular songs.
right,
And so we never see those B sides. We only see people's greatest days. We never see their
yeah,
worst on social media. We only hear the super, complete these 12 steps to change your life.
right,
But we never
right,
hear
right,
about the hard work in changing your
right,
life. They,
right.
we make it
Yeah.
sound easy. I can tell you right now, and I'm sure you were the same way, John. That day with your son was a great day, but there were, like you said, there were 6 months. So I'm sure there were many days when you had those B-sides come back. And
Oh
probably
yeah.
to this day, there are still many days in the year that those B-sides come back. We are not perfect, and it is not an easy process. Every single day I have to fight with self-doubt. Every single day I do this podcast, I have to fight the fact that I hate the sound of my voice, and I assume everyone else hates it as well. But it's not true, right? That's just my mind playing
Right,
nonsense tricks on me. It's lying to
right,
me, right? So
right.
we have to get through that. And so I love that. I love that so much. Now, talk to us about the daily six then. How did going from
Okay.
going completely just this, and by the way, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, if you're a lawyer, hit me up and let me know if I, or corporate lawyer, hit me up, let me know if I'm wrong. To my knowledge, it is still perfectly legal for banks to do what they did to John. I think there are conditions like they have to notify you it's happening. They can't just surprise you with it. But to my knowledge, that is still perfectly legal.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, walk us through how you went
Okay.
from getting completely destroyed to coming up with the Daily Six and turning it into a book.
Okay. Well, the Daily Six just sort of evolved out of trying to build a plan for a daily balance. I started reading material from authors that I hadn't read before about emotional connection, emotional balance, spiritual connection, spiritual balance, rather than business books. I was reading books that were on the softer side of leadership. So that eventually worked itself into willing to find new teachers to teach me new lessons, because, and the understanding that in willingness, I'm going to be uncomfortable. New behavior, new thoughts are uncomfortable. And just like with you worrying about the sound of your voice, which there's nothing wrong with the sound of your voice, but it doesn't change the fact that those thoughts roll through your head. It doesn't change that fact. So I had to be willing to find a way to barricade off the negativity and begin to be able to set an intention. And then that came through meditation and mindfulness practices. Even a little bit of prayer probably at some point in my life, but mostly it was meditation. And it was, the idea was clear my mind of all this swirling around crap and set my intention for today, just today. That's why the Daily Six is a daily program. So set my intention for today, and then use quiet time throughout the day to remind me of my intention, so that I don't end up wandering away. Because many of us, I'm gonna make sure I quit and go home and be home with my family at 5 o'clock every night. And it gets to be 5:15 and you think, well, tomorrow, I'll do this tomorrow. And, we end up putting the really important components of our lives on a back burner, not on the front burner where they should be, but on the back burner. So I had to learn to open my mind to new ideas. I had to open my mind and my heart through quiet time to find new teachers to teach me these lessons. And so in doing that, I ran into 3 different guys, and they're in the book. Just weird guys you run into. One guy was a night watchman in a car dealership. I happened to have a Lexus at the time, and he was a night watchman in the Lexus dealership. Who knows? I would run into that guy. But he was one of those people that just was always happy, smiling, laughing. People were hanging around him all the time. And I'm thinking, I own the Lexus. He puts the paper down on the floor when I get back in my car again. Why is he happy and why am I not happy? And so it got me to sort of do the same thing that happened with Dayton chasing him around in the house, is that all of a sudden my perspective began to change. And that became service focused, focusing on the needs of others rather than just mine. And after service comes love and forgiveness. And to me, those are 2 different components, but I think of them as one, because you need to be loving to be forgiving, and you need to be forgiving to be loving. So the idea is, if you use love the way it's written up in the book, it is simply understanding the needs of someone else and treating that need as important as if it's my own need. And that works whether it's a child or a spouse, a coworker, a boss, or a subordinate. Thinking of their needs and treating them as important as my own. And forgiveness is simply letting go of the past. It's just, what did a friend of mine used to say all the time? Giving up all hope of a different yesterday. It's just like, I'm sorry, you like to have yesterday different? Well, so would I. But guess what? You don't get that. And once you realize that, and you begin to realize that forgiveness is really for us, it's not for, if the person I'm forgiving accepts it, that's great. But what forgiveness should be is for me to let go of this anger, resentments, and judgments that I'm dragging around like an anti-Santa Claus all day long, this giant bag on my back. And then the next one is gratitude, and to learn to be grateful for all things at all times, not just the good stuff. Like you said, it's interesting that the worst thing that happened to you could have turned out to be the best thing that happened to you. And I can assure you that without some help telling me don't worry, one of these days you're going to be really happy that the bank did this. And I'm like, yeah, you're full of it. I don't think that's ever going to happen. And within 3 or 4 years, I was pretty happy. Business built up. My kids were good. I was going home on time. My children remembered me from time to time, the kind of thing. And they wanted to come over and visit versus had to come over and visit. And so it was just a great life built on a different set of principles with, every bit as much in the way of gross sales and gross profit, but nowhere near the stress and anger and frustrations of what it was like before. So, and then the final component of the Daily Six is action. Just means you can't just think about this stuff. You can, but nothing's going to change if it's all intellectual. It's got to be, you physically got to start doing some quiet time. You physically got to do something to be of service to somebody else, not just, it can be simple. You can put a quarter in somebody's parking meter. I don't care what it is. But once you begin to do silly little things like that, pay the toll of somebody behind you, or I mow my neighbor's yard because he's disabled and he can't mow his yard. So, about a year ago when we moved in here, I realized that his lawn was like, this deep, and I was trying to figure out why. And somebody said, oh, he can't really mow his lawn and can't afford to have somebody mow it. I was like, I got 2 lawnmowers right here. I'll be right back. And so I just mow his lawn. So it's not designed for him to come out and thank me for it. It's just designed because it's something that I want to do, because that's the kind of person I want to be. It's not because I want this to be transactional. I don't want to mow your lawn so you'll, babysit my kids, or I want to just mow your lawn because it needs it and I can do it. And as long as that's the case, then I'm perfectly happy to focus on the needs of others and be service focused. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible stuff. And these are all principles that I also try to live by on a daily basis. And I'm telling you, when you start doing these things, it changes your life.
It really does.
Very quickly. So, hey, John, we're running out of time, man. I wish we could spend more time talking about this, but I'll have to have you back, and I promise we'll focus solely on your book, because I know that's really why you came on here, is to talk about your book. But like I said, I ran us out of time. That's on me. I apologize for that. But go ahead and tell people how they can find you, get a hold of you, and get a hold of your book if they want it.
Okay. Well, the book is on Amazon. It is available in paperback, hardback. The hardbacks are all used books because they sold out of the hardbacks a long time ago. But paperback and an ebook and an audio book, they can get that through there. Chappelear, if you just type in the Daily Six, it'll pop up my name, and then you'll know how to spell Chappelear. If you can't spell it right, don't worry, because it took me till 8th grade. Everything pretty much on social media is either JW Chappelear or just John Chappelear. YouTube is John Chappelear, LinkedIn is John Chappelear. So it's not a complicated process. If you're trying to find me, my email address is john@johnchappelear.com. And so, reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions I can, or if it's something that I can help with, I'm happy to help. If it's something I can guide you towards something else, I'm happy to do that too.
I forgot to unmute my microphone like a schmuck.
There you go.
So, but I'm not going to edit it out, because that's what happens.
There you go.
I'm real.
That's right.
Anyway, so y'all know the deal. I'm going to have all of John's show notes or links in the show notes and in the description below. So make sure you scroll down and go give him tons and tons and tons of love. Once you're done doing that, head over to Renowned Leadership and give me tons of love as well. John, before I let you go, man, I let all my guests answer this same question, which is, what does leading like a champion mean to you?
Well, I guess it depends on the definition of champion for me. I've got actually a couple of friends who are Olympic medalists, and when we talk, it's very similar to what we talk about, which is the champion in my mind is somebody who brings somebody else to success. As a champion, my job is to go find people and, what's that called, husband them towards success. But that for me is what leading like a champion would be a person that creates an emotional connection, an honest emotional connection built on trust with other people. That would mean leadership, leading like a champion to me.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. That's what our number one job as leaders are, right? Is to lift people up, right? Like to make a bunch of mini leaders. That's the number one job. So I absolutely love it, John. John, thank you again. He is John Chappelear. I will have his name spelled correctly. So if when you go to look for him, just look down below and you'll see how to spell his name. I had to ask him like a million times how to say it. So I get it. And he gets it too.
That's right. I do.
So that's going to wrap it up this week, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. I know you guys got tons of value listening to John. So I will see you all next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. But in the meantime, never ever forget, lead like a champion. Goodbye, everybody.